Loyalty described as, do you care? And I care, and that's why I'm on this show. Comes a time, here we go.
I'm a sucker for Oteil, man. I saw that same feeling that I have, that would he filled a void that I didn't even know existed.
It feels so good to, as Ben said, to try to do something about an issue as opposed to complaining.
If you can't help, don't hurt.
If we could just all get out there and throw cream puffs at each other, maybe things, instead of bullets and angry words, it would be better.
When you stop laughing, you stop living.
There's a worldwide surge in interest in mushrooms.
It was deep, man.
It's not that TM makes your mind quiet down there. It already is. We're just stuck up here. We've lost access.
And Jumpin' Jack Flash came out by the Stones. So I thought, all right, perfect, man. I'm gonna drive. And I started driving through the neighborhood, and I got a text from Mick Jagger.
People saying that, you know, what we do is non-essential. Well, playing those few gigs that you saw me at felt pretty essential to me.
It wasn't like they were clapping from here. It was they were clapping from here.
My view of things is that death is the last and best reward for a life well lived.
Like it's the strangest of places if you look at it right, you know?
If you're liking what you're hearing, head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get your bus pass for an extra episode every week.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Comes a Time podcast. That's my pal Oteil.
That's Mike, and that's the gorilla.
Yes. This one was, boy, I had such a blast listening. I'm the first fan of this episode. This was great. Christian McBride. Holy cow.
Yeah, what an amazing podcast. Boy, it took some turns I didn't expect. You know, we did talk some music. We talked music.
A lot. Yeah.
But just beautiful. Yeah, he's a jazz bassist. Well, I can't even categorize him solely as that because he's also played with like Queen Latifah and James Brown and Paul McCartney.
So
he defies category, but he also is artistic director for the Newport Jazz Festival. He's played with every jazz great known to man that didn't die before he was 17. And he's just amazing.
Unbelievable
I don't even
person.
know what to say.
Yeah, no, this is I get to tell him at the end, but Live at Tonic was like such a it was this is not dating myself, whatever. Prior to these dumb things, we had CD books in our car, you know, and Live at Tonic
CDs.
Remember CDs? Case Logic book, but that was right at the top. Right next to Soul Live, and right next to Galactic, and and it was just like cruising around New York City, listening to that. It became like a soundtrack of Manhattan, you know, like
That is a good soundtrack of Manhattan.
It sure is, and he's awesome, and just as a just really, really great to hear you guys. And his admiration for you and yours for him, and
I was really surprised. I was like, oh man, because I mean the list of like jazz greats that he's been mentored by and is friends with is just kind of staggering. In fact, some of the fans might have heard him. He has a radio program weekly called Jazz Night in America on NPR where he's interviewed one jazz great after another. Just great conversation. His voice is so like, boy, should he be in radio, right?
Like, yeah, totally. Yeah, he does have a perfect voice. Yeah.
Dude, that voice is just like he can.
Him and Victor need to have a show together on the radio. That would just be. Imagine that. Hey, Oteil, I hate to tell you that, but you are great too. So give yourself that. You know, I mean, we're honored to know you too for a reason.
I appreciate it, but it was such a treat for me because, you know, he lived the one life that I'm jealous of because I don't play upright. So he played with all the jazz greats, but he also did James Brown. He also did, you know, all these other people that and he's such a sweet person to be nice, to be successful and to remain nice. To me, it's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
The art is great, but if you could do the art and retain your humanity and your niceness.
Yes. Yes,
that's
absolutely.
the real art to me. That's like the next art above the art. I think they're out of balance, and he's a perfect example of that, you know.
He really is, and it's just like when he talks about his upbringing and that matters so. Think about all of the great, nice people that we've had on this that have had someone say, "Check this out," or "I got you," or you know, like come with me, and that stuff matters so much. And he goes, and my mom was great.
And he was like, how'd you avoid drugs? He was like, my mom was like, man. You know?
That stuff matters, man. It does. But thank you Christian. Thank you so much. And that was really, really awesome. And again, we've said it before, we'll say it again. We have to have him back that was like part 1, maybe of 3.
Worldly. I very seldom use the term worldly to describe someone. And he is, you will learn a lot from this guy.
Yeah. He's got a show on Sirius as well. So check him out. And thank you everyone for listening. We're here on Osiris, home to so many great podcasts. Head to osirispod.com to check him out. And if you like what you're hearing, head to patreon.com/comesatimepod for bonus episodes each week. You're doing good on the road. Everything's going well. Music sounds great.
Yeah, I had 2 days off, so it's starting to get lonely, but thank God for the podcast. But the shows are going.
Yeah, you guys sound fantastic.
So that's the best part, you know. And, I just keep calling you guys when I get lonely.
Call anytime. Thank you guys for listening, and enjoy Christian, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Thank you so much for making time for us, man, because I think you truly are the busiest guy I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, you're one of my heroes, man. So, and anytime you ask, I'm there, bro.
This is great because
no bullshit. You know, I mean that.
One of the coolest things about this interview for me is that I never really worked with my heroes, and you know all of my heroes. You probably have all of my heroes' phone numbers in your phone.
Oh man,
it's crazy to hear that from you.
I know I got your phone number, so we you know, it's all balanced out there.
Well, man, I thank you so much, because I know I see you're going to Europe in a couple of days, right?
Yeah. I'm going up to Montreal on Wednesday and Thursday, and then I leave for Friday.
Yeah. You're playing with Steve Wilson.
Yeah, your homie. Yeah, we'll be in Europe for just over 2 weeks.
Nice.
Yep.
You excited to go back?
I am, man. We were in Europe actually in March, so we got the whistle wet a little bit, and we'll go back again for a second European run, and it's going to be fun, man.
Cool. Why did I think it was shut down? Because of a spike or something.
A few places started to open back up in the beginning of the year, and the places we played in Europe in March, most of them still had mask mandates. So even though we were in Europe, we still had to, you still had to be careful.
And who are you heading out there with? Who's the band for this?
My quintet, Inside Straight, with Steve Wilson, Warren Wolf, Peter Martin, and Carl Allen.
Carl Allen.
Yeah.
I know there's so many, I want to talk bass with you, but then I also want to talk drums with you. You know.
Oh man, we could talk all that, man. Whatever you want.
And I want to listen to the two of you talk bass and drums.
The first thing I want to ask you is your origin story. Did your parents play, or were you the first one to play, or?
My dad plays. Yeah, my dad. He plays bass.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's a family tradition. Both my dad and my great uncle, all bass players.
All bass.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Both upright?
Now, my dad, when I was a kid, my dad only played electric, but he switched to acoustic probably right around the time I left Philly to move to New York. So now he's primarily an upright bass player. My great uncle, he always played only upright.
Wow. So that's how you started on electric, because your dad played electric.
Yeah. You might know him. I mean, you may have run into him at some point. His name is Lee Smith. He plays mostly in the Philly area these days, but when I was a kid, he was the MD and bassist for all the great Philly soul groups, the Delphonics, Major Harris, Billy Paul, Blue Magic.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And
I've heard him a ton.
Oh, yeah, you've heard him a ton. And once I got old enough to really understand and appreciate what he was doing, by that time he was playing with Mongo Santa Maria. He played with Mongo for 5 years. Recorded 3 albums with him.
Oh, wow. See, now I got to go back. I love it. That's what I love about all this.
Yeah.
Your dad and your uncles.
Oteil, you were talking a couple weeks ago about how you want to get back heavy into vinyl, right? We got to get that vinyl collection up and running. Look at the back of look at Christian. Yeah, that's why I said it. You got a great look at that, and I bet it goes further.
Oh, it goes around, all around here,
and I bet on the floor. It's from way back too, isn't it? That's like all your original vinyl. That's not a new collection, huh?
It's sort of a mixed bag. Some of the vinyl I grew up with is back there, but some of that stuff is just so beat up, I had to rebuy it.
That's how it's like. My dad's collection was amazing,
right?
And we ruined it. And I was like, well, at least we were learning the music.
That's right.
Because you couldn't play them now, so I have to rebuy everything.
Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness, you're able to rebuy a lot of that stuff now.
Yeah, and actually be on an album, because I missed albums. Like when I started making records, there were no albums.
There are no albums, right?
I have so few of like actual vinyl of me,
You can hear how you sound on, with the actual the real frequency, the analog frequency.
Yeah, for sure.
Vinyl.
I had a chance to check out Third Man Records in Nashville, Jack White's place, and he has all these old presses, all these old record presses that, I mean, he sent people all over the world to find all these old, like real classic giant pieces, and they do live to vinyl there, and they just press these pucks down, and it's just so amazing to watch the whole process happen.
Right.
And they have a photo booth that you could go in with a guitar, pay $5, and record yourself to a vinyl, to a little 45. It's so neat that I love that it's back, and it's
my mother told me that they used to have those in amusement parks when she was a little kid.
Oh yeah.
You could actually go into a record, you could go into a booth and make a record for like $1.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
I would love to hear your big old upright bass live, like cut right to the vinyl. Like, hear that back. That's
I would too. I might have to make a trip down there.
Man. It's an amazing place. Third Man's wild. When did you move to? At what age did you move to New York, and what was the first part of New York that you lived in?
I moved to New York at age 17, right after high school graduation.
Wow.
And I went to Juilliard. So that's technically the reason I moved to New York, but I wanted to be in New York anyway because all my jazz heroes were here. And so I lived at campus housing first, which was at the Y on 63rd and Central Park. So that was my first place of residence in New York City. And then I only stayed at Juilliard for a year because as fate would have it, I started working pretty regularly. So I knew I wasn't gonna, I either had to make a decision to stay in school or keep making these gigs. So I decided to transfer to the University of the Road. And I briefly lived with my friend Mark Carey in Harlem. And then I moved to Brooklyn, Williamsburg. This is like 1990. I lived in Williamsburg for 2 years. And then I moved to 27th in Lexington. And then I spent most of my time on the Upper East Side. I lived up there. I lived in a building called Normandy Court. I lived there for almost 10 years. And then I got married and moved to New Jersey and been here ever since.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. Oh, man, I want to backtrack a little bit because I want to talk about your early days in Philly.
Yeah.
I met up with this cat, Little John Roberts, when he was still very, very young.
That's my man.
You used to play with him. He played drums on my last record.
Yes.
I used to play with him. He told me he was playing with you and Joey DiFrancesco.
That's right.
And was it Kurt Rosenwinkel?
Kurt Rosenwinkel, that's right.
I mean, it's like such heavyweights. And you guys were kids, right?
And our second string drummer in the All City Band was Questlove.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is why I said I want to talk about Philly.
Yeah.
What the hell is in the water in Philly? I mean, you guys were like supermen.
Well, I mean, what's in the water from where you're from down there in Virginia? All them bad cats. Newport News, right?
Well, I'm from D.C., but when I was 19, I moved to Virginia Beach, and then that's where I met Billy Drummond,
Steve Wilson, right.
James Genus, the Wooten Brothers.
Yeah.
And on and on and on and on.
Yeah, well, man, I think you that whole Amtrak line, DC, Philly, Baltimore.
Yeah, but I was playing in the top 40 band, and you were playing with Bobby Watson and stuff. You guys were killing.
You had more people at your gig.
See, this is still the same. It's like, it's funny you say that because we just got done with like Dodger Stadium and Wrigley Field and stuff. And it's like, I guess the grass is always greener. I'm so envious. Like, man, you play with all my heroes. And it's like, yeah, I did just play for 40,000 people. But,
Well, man, it's such a thrill to be on here with you, man. Like I said, I've been one of your biggest fans for so long. If you will allow me, so OTO plays two very distinct moments in my life with regards to you. I'd always been a fan of your playing, but back, it was like 20 years ago when there was that big Jaco Pastorius tribute at the Beacon.
Oh, yeah. Most nervous I ever been.
Yeah, let me tell you something. In my eyes, you stole the show that night, man. Because, like everybody in the world was on that gig. Victor was there, Steve was there. I think
and
Victor
all the cats that played with Jaco.
That's right. Yeah, Don Elias. Yep. Lenny White. It was the rhythm section. Gil Goldstein and Jeff Berlin. So all these cats were there.
My stomach's starting to hurt again.
Man, you went out there and you played three views of a secret, solo electric bass. Man, there was not a dry eye in the house.
Really?
Man, dude, I was backstage mesmerized. Like, now I knew OT was bad, but I didn't know he could do all that. And man, at that point, I became a OTO Burbridge loyalist.
Wow, and, I didn't know that. So, I don't even remember the crowd reaction. I was so nervous. First time my hands were in a cold sweat. I had never experienced that before. But all these people that played with Jaco were there, and his family. Everybody was sitting out there, and I was just like,
"That's right." Felix played that night too. I was like, that might have been the first time a lot of people heard him.
Richard Bona was there.
Richard. That's right. Yeah.
Dude,
and I remember Anthony Jackson was backstage kind of pissed. He was like, how come nobody called me for this gig?
Well, he's got a point.
Yeah. and I felt guilty because, it's like still a lot of people, I mean, musicians know, but I'm a doubler, but like, I thought, it's like, wow, I'm on this gig and Anthony Jackson isn't. Oh man, I felt like shriveling up and going home.
You've probably been in that position a lot, though. Honestly.
Well, yeah, but I felt like particularly with that Jocko gig, that might have been. Actually, no, Victor Bailey was not on that gig. I don't know why. I know he had been called, but he didn't make it that night. But,
Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey.
Right.
That's what you put the two names together.
I knew Victor Wooten was going to be, but I remember in my head thinking Victor Bailey was on that gig too, but he wasn't, now that I think about it. Yeah. But my second O'Teal story was, so, I've had this career in radio now for the last 8 years or so. And I've been hosting Jazz Night in America on NPR since 2014. But I feel like my trial by fire radio audition was in 2011. I sat in for John Schaefer as host of Soundcheck on WNYC. And I was the substitute host for, I think, 3 or 4 days or something like that. And they said, you can pick your own guest. Who do you want your guest to be? And if you want, invite some musicians and you guys can jam. And so my first show as host for Soundcheck, you were my musical guest.
That was the first one?
That was the first one. Wow. And I remember I had just gotten new Federa. And you and I jammed that day. And I just remember being like, first of all, I'm scared to be hosting live radio in New York City, of all places. And then I got to play a duet with one of my bass heroes for the first time, like all this on live radio. You talk about just being exposed on every level.
You're a New Yorker. You're tough. That's what you guys eat for breakfast.
Oh, man.
Stress.
Yeah,
stress and cheese. Stress and cheese on a hard
roll.
That's why you're one of my heroes, because I have New York just scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't go there and starve and get defeated by the stress.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was just like, and I guess everything works out the way it's supposed to, but I admire the toughness of New Yorkers, even though I couldn't live there.
Your problem, had you moved to New York, you wouldn't have. Your problem would have been being so good. You just would have wiped so many cats off the map. You would have had to deal with all of the haters.
Yeah, but I couldn't read music. Like one of the big reasons I didn't move is because I don't read music. So I was like, well, all the session work, that won't be an avenue for you to be able to make money. And then all the jazz cats, since I don't play upright, that would, but this is all in my head. Like I was an 18, 19-year-old.
Right.
Right. When different thing you beat.
Well, like you said, man, things work out, and you're still a big hero to so many, man.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Well, I want to talk about some of your heroes that are all my heroes that you played with.
Hey, let's go.
Well, first of all, I guess the biggest question I want, because this is a big thing that we do on this podcast, is we talk about certain themes. Mental health is one.
Yes.
Mentors is a big one. Talk to me about the mentors that were most important for you coming up.
As you mentioned, Philadelphia is such a great music city, such a legacy and tradition, not just of musicians, but also music education.
Yes.
I feel like Philadelphia is still one of the few places in the country where, if you're a young kid wanting to play music, You still have schools to go to, a lot of private teachers you can study with. So with that, I had a number of great mentors, most namely a gentleman by the name of Lovett Hines. Lovett Hines was the band director at a place called the Settlement Music School. And that's where I met Joey DeFrancesco. We started playing in that youth ensemble when, I was 12. And, basically everybody came through that ensemble. Kurt, Rosenwinkel, like we mentioned earlier. And so I remained in touch with Mr. Hines even after I left out of Philly. And, we're still close to this very day. So he was a great mentor. I studied with a man named Neil Courtney, who was the associate principal bassist for the Philadelphia Orchestra. He passed away many years ago, but he was a great mentor. A woman named Margie Keefe, who was actually my very first bass teacher in middle school. But so those were all teachers, but the first musicians I met who were a little older than me, who were like big brothers to me. And, I learned a lot of music from them as well as, playing gigs, were these brothers named the Landom brothers, Robert Landom and Byron Landom. Robert Landom is one of the greatest saxophone players in the world. He played in the Ellington band for a while. He played in Joey DeFrancesco's band for a while. And his brother Byron, great drummer, played with Betty Carter for a minute, also played with Joey D. Those were the guys who they weren't teachers, but they were older than me. So I thought of them as like my big brothers. And Robert I would go over to his house and he would say, hey man, I know what they're showing you at school, but here, let me hip you to these Wayne Shorter albums. Let me hip you to these McCoy Tyner records, these Miles Davis records, so, and he knew theory and harmony really well. So, we would sit down and we would listen to a record like ESP, and he would say things like, so listen to this line that Wayne plays over this E7 sharp 9 chord, check these notes out, so he could break things down for me, in a real fun way. And so I learned a lot from Robert and Byron.
Do they teach that stuff at school now? Because I always think, wow, they're not teaching Wayne Shorter and Miles in school, but back then, were they not doing it? Was it all classical?
Well, you know what I regret? So I went to a performing arts high school in Philly, creative and performing arts high school. And, again, that's where me, Joey, Questlove, Black Thought, Boys to Men, we all went to school there. And Joey and I tested out of music theory. They said, you guys know all this stuff already. You don't need to go to this. And so we actually never went to any music theory classes in high school because they assumed that we knew that stuff already. And
got you.
I regret that. I guess if they were breaking down triads, yeah, maybe. But like all that extended harmony stuff that Robert was showing me, I don't know if they were teaching that in music. I don't think they were. I doubt it. But
that's great.
Yeah, a lot of what I learned about harmony and theory, I learned that just like kind of from different cats around Philly. Larry McKenna is another person I must mention from Philly. He's still with us. He's in his late 80s now, I believe. But there was a summer camp at Community College of Philadelphia, and Larry McKenna taught jazz harmony. And I learned more from Larry McKenna in that one summer because they had they had keyboards like for every student. So he would have up on the board B flat 13, and he would show us how to voice a B flat 13 chord on the piano. A half diminished, and he would show us how to voice that on the piano. So that was just it was fascinating. It was invaluable information. And so by the time I moved to New York City, I felt like I had a good grasp on a lot of basics.
Yeah.
Oteil, like you said earlier, there's a lot of themes that we talk about. One of them seems to be this community of education for people who are really game. Like, how many folks have we talked to that met at Berkeley or met at, it seems like that those moments in school prepared you to go confidently into New York and be like, watch out, look what I got.
Yeah. And I
you
also
see it at different towns too.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I knew that, it is New York, and what you learn in school is not always easy to actually put into practice once you actually get out there and start working. So I knew I was going to get embarrassed and get my ass kicked by, a lot of the cats who were already on the scene, but I actually couldn't wait for that, because more than anything else, I just wanted to be able to earn the right to be able to play with these cats. So, if I got my ass handed to me on the bandstand, hey, I knew that was coming. So I'm almost, in a way, almost got into my head, like, you're going into the military almost, So be prepared to get shown up.
That's part of that Philly thing too. Right. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I want it. I want all the smoke.
Right.
So great. I love it, man. That's too much. Well, it's one thing I try to talk to students about is you see this. I love New Orleans, and my friends down there, that town. We all know the Marsalis as far as jazz, but everything from, the Batiste and the Neville's,
right?
And it's just all these families, right?
Yeah.
And I asked Ivan Neville one time, I was like, how are so many New Orleans musicians so good?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And I said, I know it's in the families, and I know it's in the water, but what? And he said the music education, it was so strong in the schools, and I see that you see that in Detroit. Giovanni Collier, bass player.
Absolutely. Yep. JV.
And he told me, he was like, yeah, I got James Jameson's SVT. I was like, what? I mean, not SVT, B15. I was like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, I got one. I was like, how in the hell did you get that? He goes, well, he was my high school bass teacher. I was like,
I don't think I knew that. Wow.
He was his high school.
That's crazy.
He went to class at high school and brought his bass, and there was James Jameson.
Wow.
But when you see that kind of education, if it's set up, you see this incredible harvest of greatness.
Man, I can't think of any city that has had a strong educational system that has not produced some very serious musicians who are like navigating the way music goes in the world today. Philly, Detroit, New Orleans. I mean, so I never understood why you always have to convince the powers that be that music education is important.
It's like, what's the first thing that gets cut?
It's like, you can make tons of money off it. You should think that'd be enough, right?
Right. That's right. The Roots, they're actually trained musicians. John Batiste, he's actually a trained musician. Kamasi Washington, he's a trained musician. Esperanza Spalding, trained musician. They all came up through these arts programs.
It makes me think that all these other towns that have these crops, these harvests, like Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
There must have been some music education there. Because you just have all these cats come out. I'm like, what's in the water in Tulsa? As if that turns out education's in the water.
See, there you go.
And it's so sad to see so many schools have to go ask for money for instruments or ask for anything just to help save the music education programs. It's really terrible.
Yeah, my wife started a nonprofit called Jazz House Kids many years ago, and it was for that very reason, because she got called to do a master class, and at that time it was in Newark. And Newark at one point had a very strong music educational system, and then they started cutting those, and Melissa smartly put 2 and 2 together and said, well, look, if these schools are going to start getting rid of their music programs, maybe I should start a nonprofit, and so we've dedicated ourselves to music education.
That's great.
Much like you cats have,
Man, bless you for doing that. That's definitely one of the things I wanted to talk about and plug. You just do so much, man. I mean, you're an amazing human. I don't know how you have the time to do all of it, but you got a radio show on Sirius, right? Then you got your weekly radio show on NPR.
Right.
You got Jazz House Kids. You're the artistic director for Newport Jazz Festival, and also
get ready.
Jersey Pack. Is that what it is? NJ?
Yes, NJ Pack. Yep.
And probably more than, how do you fit it all in?
Oh, well, brother, you know how we do, man. We're always, we never can just play bass. We always got to have some side hustle going somewhere. All this other stuff, man, I never prepared or frankly ever even thought about doing any of this other stuff, curating, arts administration, radio. All this, that stuff just kind of came from just simply showing up to the gig and playing the bass and really having a passion of studying people. I really love people as much as I love playing the bass, and I think it is because, and you're from DC, so you can identify with this. Growing up in Philly, everybody was tough. You had to play the dozens every day. People talking about your mother and calling you fat, and it's like every day was a struggle. Just coming through the hood. And like you had to develop a thick skin, and I think I had developed semi-thick skin, but it hit me one day like, look at people's reaction when you're actually nice to them, and I always kept that in mind. So like, when I would be around the guys in the neighborhood and, they'd be torturing people, I would see those people when I wasn't with them and be like, hey, how you doing? And a simple, hey, how you doing would always get such a wonderful reaction from people. They'd be like, oh, hey, how you doing?
We can be happy.
Right. And so I had learned early, like, just simply be nice to people. You could probably find out who they really are. So and I know sometimes in the hood it's the other way around. It's like you be hard on people. You kind of get to their core in a certain sort of semi-cruel way, and that's how you find out who they are. But I always try to, I like going the reverse.
Well, sometimes no good deed goes unpunished, but
that's
I still go.
That too, right?
That's what I would retreat from the hood. I would just like go into the music room, and me and Kofi would play, and I was like, "It's crazy." The niceness doesn't get rewarded.
Yeah,
but now that I look back, like I'd see all the people back in the neighborhood. I was like, yeah, it really was that way. There was a lot of really, and still are. Some of them are still there. It's really cool. Yeah.
Did you know a guy named? I'm trying to think. All my. How old were you when you moved to Virginia?
I graduated high school in '82, so I think I left in '83. You might know Ron Sutton. Did you know Ron Sutton?
Man, when I lived in Harlem with Mark Carey, Ron Sutton was one of our roommates.
See, that was to him and Kofi were the ones that were trying to say, I'm a drummer, so I know jazz from drumming.
Yes.
And so when I started playing electric, it was like all bootsy and, you know.
Which is why your rhythm is so strong.
Well, it was like Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Bootsy.
Sure.
Yeah, but then Kofi, my older brother, and Ron Sutton were the ones that were explaining jazz harmony to me.
God bless both their souls, man.
Yeah. I couldn't get it all. Like, I'm starting to get it more now.
Right.
But yeah, that's crazy. You were roommates with Ron Sutton.
Yeah.
Oh, too much, man.
Small
that
world, man.
Way back. Yeah, like 16 years old, man. 16 years old.
So my to know, I got to be in the James Brown inner circle, and that was because of a guy from DC who was his drummer named Mousy. You know Mousy Thompson by any chance?
I don't.
Yeah.
Robert, I left there in '83. I don't know if.
Yeah, he and I can't remember who he came after Ricky Wellman in Chuck Brown's band.
Yeah, Chuck Brown, the Soul Searchers.
That's right. So Mousy went from Chuck Brown to Wilson Pickett to James Brown. And he still lives in D.C.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. So now, James Brown, we got it because you played with all my heroes. This is what I want to do. What was it like playing with Sonny Rollins? What was it like playing with Herbie? You know, let's start at James Brown.
Well, man, you've heard enough stories about James Brown that you could probably figure out exactly what I would tell you. You know, I had no different an experience than anyone else. I mean, obviously the man was a genius, but he was quite tempestuous, unpredictable. You know, when he was in a good mood, it was wonderful. When he was not in a good mood, you didn't want to be in the same city.
Did he ever call you? My favorite stories are when like your phone rings and you look at your cell phone and you're like, oh, that's Bootsy, or you know, whatever. Like,
yeah.
You ever get the James Brown phone call? You're like, damn, James Brown just called me.
Well, I can't play it for you, but you know, I've made it a habit of saving my favorite voicemails. I started that in the mid '90s, back when we had the answering machines with a cassette tape in it.
So you got like a terabyte of them now.
Yes, yeah. And so I've saved all of my favorite voicemails, and I have two voicemails from James Brown's secretary that I always saved. And but probably the best phone call I ever got from James Brown, and this, you know, when you get a call from the Godfather of Soul, this is how it goes down. It's almost like it's presidential. So the phone rings, and I see Augusta, Georgia on the caller ID, and I pick up the phone. I say, "Hello, is this Christian McBride?" "Yes." "Please hold. I have James Brown on the line." And they put me on hold. Living in America comes on the hold system. She comes back about 15 seconds later. Amazing. And she says, "Mr. McBride? Okay, Mr. Brown, go ahead, please." And then the phone clicks, and then James Brown comes on the line. Now, as far as I know, that's the way you received a phone call from the president. You know,
it is,
because I remember
Living in America was playing too, probably.
Yeah, that's right. Living in. So I remember like during the World, like anytime a team would win the World Series, and like the president would call into the team at the end, you know, that's how it went down. You know, and I was like, wow, a simple phone call from James Brown is just the sheer entertainment and drama of it all. You know.
But that's legit. Like, I have a picture of James Brown standing next to his jet with Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like that's legit.
I mean, you got to adapt the man for, you know, understanding the value of his power.
So what are some other phone calls that you were just like, Because I've had some like that I can't show people. I was like, wow, if I just turn my phone around right now. But that's more from the rock and roll and not.
Yeah,
like,
but I'm sure you still get those calls, man.
No, like I don't pick up my phone and it says Sonny Rollins.
Well, hey. No, but I know you've had those calls from, I mean, I can't imagine who, looking at your phone, man, or just the wagging tongues at the end of every gig, because you do that to people, man.
Well,
I get a lot of nerds at the end of at the gig, what kind of strings do you use on your bass? Oh my goodness, I love how you superimposed the flat 9 on that dominant 7th chord, but you get people that actually, like, oh my God, O'Teal, you play the hell out of the bass.
It's funny because my friend Tom Guarno, who's like a jazz guitarist in New York, he said one of the cats he was playing was like, yeah, man, you playing all them starve notes. Like the nerdy, like the flat 9, blah, blah, blah. And that's been my thing. It's like, can I get away with playing the flat 9 with vocals and people actually get it? And turns out Grateful Dead was the way to do it.
Yes, that's right.
Who knew?
That's right.
The harmony's deep with them, man. Like these tunes are deep. In fact, I would love to hear you play Stella Blue because
oh my God.
I love their ballads.
Sure.
And I kept thinking this ballad Stella Blue and China Doll too.
Yes. Yeah.
I keep hearing something in the air over it, and I realized it was an upright bass solo. I was like, I think I'm hearing Mingus like soloing over this.
Right.
You would kill it, man. You would kill it, dude. And have fun.
I got to play with Bob once.
Really?
It was at a fundraiser somewhere out in Northern California, and we just did some jamming, and it was such a thrill to play with him. Yeah, it was fun.
Wow. You're so open-minded for like a jazz cat. Like when I think of all the cats that know, like for our Comes a Time fans who are, largely Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers band.
Right.
They might not know a lot of the names that I throw out, but you are so intimately connected with the tradition from Ray Brown, and you probably hung out with Slam Stewart, right?
No, I did see him live when I was in high school. It had to have been one of his last gigs. I think he passed away when I was still a teenager, but I did get to see him live. Yeah. That was unforgettable.
I mean, for our fans, this is someone who has recordings in the 30s.
Right. That's right.
And so you're such a historian and such, won't say a traditionalist, but you know the tradition as well as anybody, but your mind is so open to like play with Bob Weir or.
Right. Well, thank you, brother.
You played with McCartney, right? Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Fish fans. The band's 3-day run on the beach in Atlantic City is just around the corner, August 5th through 7th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Do you remember that amazing tweezer into bathtub gin from Friday last year? Or the drowned ghost combo from Saturday? What about that Numberline encore on Sunday for all our friends? The AC weekend last summer was a blast. The band gave us 3 great days of music, the weather was beautiful, and the vibes were sky high. We're so glad they're bringing it back again, and we hope to see you there. We'll be dancing on the beach, keeping our feet in the ocean while we enjoy our favorite band. What can be better? Join us this year and get tickets now at osirispod.com/AC.
What's up, everybody? This is Mike, and today's show is sponsored by Sunset Lake CBD, a Vermont hemp farm crafting affordable CBD products designed to help with stress and sleep without breaking the bank.
Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned hemp farm located just outside of one of our favorite places, Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. We had them on the podcast. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD.
And Sunset Lake CBD crafts products with hemp grown on their family farm and ships them directly to the customer, cutting out all the cost associated with getting on the shelves at stores. They have CBD products for every occasion and offer tinctures, salves, edibles, coffee, smokables, and even for that anxious dog of yours, they have pet products.
Ooh, I need to get some for my dog that's barking all the time. But I'll tell you this, I use these. The Sour Bears.
So good.
They are CBD gummies. I literally, no joke, I take these every night. They help me sleep. And it's almost bedtime.
Yep. And I still, as said it before, I'll say it again. You go to a long show, you come home, my 42-year-old ankles are not what they used to be. And I rub that salve all over them and put them up, enjoy a nice cocktail, and just let it ooze right into those sore bones. And you know what, folks? All you Comes a Time fans, if you check them out at sunsetlakecbd.com and use promo code TIME, T-I-M-E, you'll get 20% off all products. That's sunsetlakecbd.com. Use promo code TIME, 20% off all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer-owned, Vermont-grown. Thank you.
Get you some.
I mean, I will tell you, brother, I was, thank you for that, man. I owe a lot of that to being from Philly, because I heard a lot of different music coming across my radar just every day, you know, everything from Gamble & Huff to Hall & Oates to the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Yes.
And like all kinds of stuff, you know, and then avant-garde jazz, fusion, straight ahead. So like, you didn't really have a chance to get into one thing because there was just too much music around you all the time, you know.
Good problem to have.
Right.
Yeah.
But specifically, my great uncle, who was he's the sole reason I fell in love with jazz. It wasn't until later on I realized how dogmatic a lot of jazz fans are. Like, they love nothing but jazz. They're almost they're protective of the tradition, almost to a detriment. You know, it's like anything you like outside of this tradition is straight up bad. You know, but my great uncle, who taught me about Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, he never once said to me that, because most older jazz cats were like, Prince, oh man, you don't need to listen to that stuff, man. You just listen to Miles. You don't need that Prince, all that Michael Jackson bullshit, all that Jay. You don't need all that, But my great uncle never once said that contemporary pop music was not worth listening to. He knew I was a James Brown head. He knew I was a Michael Jackson, Prince head, and never once did he tell me to stop listening to that. He said, "Man, I love all those guys, man. Keep that in your palate. Just add this on to it."
That's great.
Yeah.
So I always thank him for that, because he never once gave me any strange looks for listening to pop or rock or rap, as it was known then before it was hip hop.
Yeah.
So
yes,
he embraced it all.
Well, and what's interesting about a lot of those pure, like you said, the folks that try to maintain that legacy or protect it, is if they looked at some of these, like maybe musicians from these other genres, and realized if they put two layers back onto the onion, it's jazz that inspired what they're listening to.
I always felt like when it comes to education, particularly with jazz education, I find it hard, like, if you're 15, 16, 17 years old and you're just even slightly curious about learning about jazz, I'm surprised more teachers don't start from contemporary and work their way back. They start at like the 20s or the 30s, and they try to bring them up to speed.
That's a good point.
It's hard.
You might Luther Vandross and go back with Marcus back through Miles, right?
Yeah, right. So I'll say, well, I would think it would be easier to grab them with something that they like now and like slowly start backtracking. And I think it's fascinating when you do that, you know.
I learned about so much jazz through hip hop, like A Tribe Called Quest.
Of course.
And De La Soul and
absolutely
Nas and the Roots and all of that, because, you know, I love to, it was kind of neat that it was like almost little samples of tastes and flavors of different music. And then you go find it. And then you're like, oh, that's that whole song. Like, that's neat. That's Art Blakey. Wow, that's neat. Like, you know, I learned that in a, you know, Tribe song or whatever. And that's really cool. That's awesome. Your uncle gave you that, you know, kind of listen to all of it and just stack it on top. You know,
and you know, my Uncle Howard, that's my great uncle we've been talking about. His core, like the music he loved, like his go-to was like Ornette Coleman, Cecil Taylor, Albert Ayler, Sun Ra. He's a huge fan of like that way out avant-garde, right? And the outer the better, right?
So, I love it.
And but he never once told me like, you know, hey man, this is what you should listen to. He was so balanced in like the music that he taught me. You know, he would play some Sun Ra and follow it up with like Louis Armstrong, you know, and then follow that up with Weather Report, and then follow that up with like Nat King Cole, you know. So like, he knew so much about every era and style of jazz. But once he was done teaching, you know, he'd light up his joint and go put on. You know what I'm saying?
Time for James Blood Homer.
Ooh, you know it. You know.
You know, it's funny. I never heard all that stuff till I met one of my biggest mentors, Colonel Bruce Hampton. And what he taught me about was folk music.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'll never forget when I heard it was Pine Top Perkins. And the way Pine Top was playing blues was so close to Sun Ra and Monk. Like, in a way, it was out. And I went, oh, all of this is folk music. And then I understood Sun Ra, and especially seeing it, because we went to see Sun Ra and we actually hung out with him.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh, he blew our minds, dude. It was so heavy.
I showed someone a Sun Ra video. And I wish I could remember who it was, and they were mesmerized by this video, and they were like, "Yo, that's George Clinton and the P-Funk All-Stars a generation before George Clinton and the P-Funk All-Stars,
like in the 50s."
Yeah,
the mothership, everything, the outfit.
That's right.
The whole, and he's, to me, like a lot of people cover Around Midnight, but man, when Sun Ra plays Monk, it's like,
oh man, that's right. Or when
so
Monk
deep.
plays Duke Ellington, you know, so like that whole backtrack, the tradition thing, you know.
Yes, it comes back. It all comes back.
It's funny you would say that because like I read about Ornette Coleman before I heard his music. And when my great uncle was getting me into jazz, he brought me a big stack of Downbeat magazines. He was like, hey, you know, I want you to read up on the music. So I would read these magazines and I would see, you know, what these critics would say about Ornette Coleman, you know, father of the avant-garde, you know, the last great jazz innovator, you know, and, you know, cutting edge, you know, all of those, you know, sort of cliche phrases that they use for musicians that, you know, are kind of off the beaten path. So I remember I first heard, I think it might have been the album, The Shape of Jazz to Come.
Yeah.
And I like the first 3 or 4 Ornette Coleman pieces I ever heard in my life. I vividly remember my reaction. It was kind of like, what's so out about this? Like I hear the blues, you know, like it's like abstract blues to me, you know. It sounds like Ornette Coleman's quartet sounds blues. Like a bunch of drunk country western musicians that didn't rehearse, you know.
That's what I heard. A friend of mine plays keyboards with me, Jason Crosby. We were talking about Ornette and how I thought Ornette and Cecil and these guys were like folk music. He was like, oh, yeah. I went over his house and played with him one day. I was like, what? So he put it on he gave it to me. I have it on my computer. We were listening to it. And I was just like, it's the blues, man.
It's the blues.
It's the blues. It's folk music. It's just the blues in every key all at once. It's like Picasso.
That's right. That's right.
The nose is over here.
Which is why I've always had a big problem with, particularly with jazz critics. They seem to really love things that don't have blues in it. I can't get with that, man. It's got to have,
even Art Tatum. It can be
something.
as technical as it can be, but it's got to have that.
Exactly. So, I mean, I've always loved Ornette Coleman's music just because I can feel the roots in it, that roots music. No matter how weird it gets, there's always some gravity with the roots music in there.
And I always tell these guys, like, I love inside. I love architecture. I love the Sistine Chapel, the Eiffel Tower, the pyramids, whatever. But if your mom dies, are you going to cry in a key?
Ooh.
No. Right? There's human expression that has to come out. And these guys could not keep a lid on it. Coltrane got to that point. He was like, there's something more that's trying to, and it just was like,
I often try to wonder, like you fantasize where, I'm sure you've done this too. We've all done this. Like, what would have Coltrane taken on next had he lived? What would Hendrix have taken on next had he lived?
Yeah.
Like, well, because like sometimes I think about Coltrane, like I almost feel like maybe he thought that he knew his time was short, and so he had to.
I wonder that.
Because you study his career, and it's like as much artistic ground as he covered in such a short period of time. Like what would he have possibly done next? I mean, he probably would have had to embrace electric music. I mean,
I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Part of me feels like he might have hooked up with Hendrix before. Everybody puts Miles and Hendrix together. I think Train probably would have hooked up with Hendrix before Miles.
Wow. Yeah. Really.
God.
Yeah.
It's so great to think about because, I even look at pairings like Ornette when Colonel Bruce was helping me understand and helping me get it. All my friends were deadheads that were trying to turn me on to the Grateful Dead, which I didn't get back then. But then we came across this album with Ornette had Jerry Garcia on it.
Yeah.
So who knows what the Cats would have done had they lived. I mean,
and of course Ornette with the Plastic Ono Band.
Yeah. With what? Say again?
And Ornette with the Plastic Ono Band with Yoko Ono's.
John and Yoko. Yeah.
Yeah, John and Yoko. Yeah.
I mean, these cats were open-minded. Like, who knows what they would have done? And then, sometimes you go back and look at like cats like I found out, from Colonel Bruce that Pharoah Sanders played with Bobby Blue Bland.
Yes, that's right.
And T-Bone Walker was it Barney Kessel? No. It was Kessel, right?
Barney. Yeah, no, you were right.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh man, these, there's this. They know about that root,
And so I started, I started doing some work with Edgar Meyer about a decade ago, and being around Edgar, I said, hey man, I knew how much of a king and legend he is, not just in the classical world, but also in the bluegrass world.
Yeah.
So I said, man, teach me about some of this stuff. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, being around Edgar and learning about so many, these great players in the history of bluegrass. He introduced me to Sam Bush, and I learned about people like the Stanley Brothers,
God, I didn't know you knew this stuff. This is what I learned from the Colonel, man. I played all these bluegrass gigs where I know for a fact I was the first black guy to ever play some of these festivals.
Right.
And man, the first musicians I met, Scott Vestal and Matt Mundy and Jeff Autry and Martin, I was like, these guys are killing it. And they turned me on to Sam Bush. That's how I've got on to Edgar Meyer and Bela Fleck and all these guys, Stuart Duncan.
Yep, Stuart.
You know, just tons of them just killing.
And Chris Steele is just... Chris is annoyingly great.
He's, Isn't he a MacArthur Genius Award guy?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm pretty sure Chris Steele is.
But, you know, I was going to tell you, so learning about that, I started backing my way into like learning about like country music. And I didn't, you know, I'd always heard, but I didn't quite know like jazz guys, particularly Charlie Hayden. Now here's where all of these roads connect. So I knew Charlie Hayden from Ornette Coleman. Yeah. And Ornette Coleman is from Texas, which is where all that blues comes from. I didn't realize Charlie Hayden grew up singing country music with his family. So like there's this whole country, western, avant-garde, blues, roots music, you know, coming together. And then I met and started hanging with Gary Burton. And Gary Burton told me about his history with country music. And then Gary said, man, you need to check out a guy named Hank Garland. And so I started listening to Hank Garland, who was known mostly in the country music world as a session guitarist. But like the guy was totally straight out of the, you know, Charlie Christian, you know, straight up jazz guitar, you know, Kenny Burrell and all of those cats. And I bought his first album on Columbia, which I believe Gary played on. And he's playing like all this killing jazz stuff. So like the lines are so blurred if you just like look at the history of this music. So
you go back.
It pays to have an open mind because you learn more. You learn more about music, people, culture, the world, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I got a good one for you because we found this when I met Matt Mundy. He was a mandolin player with Colonel Bruce. And he's from Forsyth County, Georgia, like up in North Georgia. And totally in the bluegrass world. So I turned him on to Charlie Christian. And he was like, hey, I know that song. I know that song. And I was like, how do you know these songs already? He goes, from Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys.
That's
he had a mandolin player, Tiny Moore, right? And so I found out, I was like, wait a minute. These guys are playing the same tunes. They all knew about each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I heard this group playing Caravan, Duke Ellington's Caravan. And it wasn't Ellington's band. It sounded like a country band. I went like, who in the world is this? And somebody said, this is Ernest Tubb. And I said, who is Ernest? And then I started paying attention to Ernest Tubb. And I was like, oh my gosh. You just learn. Yeah. It's mind blowing when you learn stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we always come back to this thing of like, God, what if slavery hadn't happened? Think of the music that we would not have. Because bluegrass is Bill Monroe learned all these Celtic tunes from his grandmother.
Right.
And then this old black guy that would play at these field things that would go over 2-3 nights straight. I think his name was Arnold Schultz. And he taught him the blues.
Right.
And he mixed Celtic music with the blues and created bluegrass. And the same is with Jimmy Rogers, Hank Sr. I think Jimmy Rogers did a record with Louis Armstrong.
Yes. Yeah.
All these black and white, like, and you know, it's people, and I met these people. I lived in Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee for almost 40 years. And all these people, they've not racist, never been racist.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the music thing, they were all like, yeah, it goes way back.
Yeah.
Way back.
You know, sadly, it's a dangerous narrative to suggest that there could possibly be white people in the world who aren't racist.
It is sad, isn't it? Especially from the South.
Specifically from the South. That's right.
And don't let them be Christians.
Oh,
I know
boy.
them. I know them. I played with them.
You got to take life case by case. You can't put everybody under an umbrella. You know.
No. Man, I could blow people's minds. If I could pull some people on this podcast right now and you heard their accent, you know?
and that's the part about being open-minded and actually, you know, not judging people for what they are. You know, that's too easy to do. You know, you're an older white person from the South who never really had much access to anything outside of your community. You're probably racist, right? You can't do that, right? No more than they could say, "Oh, you're a black guy from West Philadelphia." You know,
from Southeast Washington.
You must be a thug gangster. You know,
right. It's too easy.
Yeah, even if you're a rapper, right?
Totally.
So,
now, look, I mean, obviously there is a very true American narrative with regards to slavery and racism and discrimination. But inside of that, you got to know that there are some bright lights and some ways through that painful history of our country.
Yes. Well, you couldn't have had the Underground Railroad with just black people.
I don't think you can have much of anything without some help from somewhere, you know.
That's the truth. I experienced this directly when I went to a church down there that it was a white Southern Baptist church. I had been challenged by my ex-wife to go. We weren't married yet. I was like, well, if you can find a church where we can go, where we're buying a house together, we live together, and we're not married, I'll go. And a gay friend of ours who's at the house said, well, you can go to my church. I'm a deacon. We said a real church, not whatever Fruit Loops church let you be a deacon. And he said, well, it's a Southern Baptist church. So I was like, well, now I just got to see this. So I went. A lot of the congregation was openly gay. I was like, this was in the late 90s. I was like,
wow.
What? Okay, so there's an old lady there named Polly. She's 92. And I was interviewing people at the church because I was just like, for posterity, for this very reason, to show they exist. And I said, Polly, I hate to stereotype you because I'm black and we've been stereotyped a lot.
Right.
But as a 92-year-old, like, how are you not racist?
Right. Yeah.
You know? And she said,
probably appreciated that question, though, right?
She worked in the field with black people. Mm-hmm. And she said, I was treated just as bad as black people. She said they didn't care about the peons. I had never even heard that word.
Right.
And so she was racist because she was just one of the blacks. She was treated just as badly.
Right.
And I was like, well, yeah, the poor and the rich don't give a shit. The rich don't give a shit about the poor, even if they're the same color.
Man, listen, my mother-in-law, rest her soul, she passed away a few years ago, but she was an Italian-American woman from Queens who married a black man from Brooklyn in 1954. Did not go over well, right?
Yeah.
And so she was blacklisted by her family, and they wound up going to college together at the University of Michigan. And my mother-in-law told me about a letter that she had received from the dean, saying, you are desecrating our university. How dare you date a black man? So he played football and was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And he said, look, if we're having this kind of trouble being together, in, Michigan, God knows we're not going to be received well in Green Bay. So he decided to go to Canada. He played in the CFL, which is why Melissa was born in Canada. And so I would hear these stories that she would tell, and she was like, "Look, I'm an Italian American girl from Queens." She was like, "I experienced so much racism. Just for me, I can't imagine what it's like being black." She was like, she was like, she was like, that whole word is not in my, I don't know that word, and anybody who demonstrates any little nuance of racism, she was like, I'm very sensitive to that. And you just mentioned how, class, I think, is probably more of an issue that I think we should pay closer attention to because, excuse me, I think King figured that out. In my heart, I really believe that was sort of like the final straw for people who did not like Martin Luther King.
That's what got him killed. That's
what got him killed, man. When he finally when he started telling poor white people that, you know what, and poor black people, we have more in common than you think. Yes. This isn't about racism. They don't like us because we don't have any money and we can't do anything for, now they're called the 1%. He's like, but you think the powers that be care about you because you're white? No, if you don't have any money, we're all the same color. And that's
that's how Trump got elected.
That's right.
He said, you think the powers that be care about you because you're white? And Bernie said the same thing.
That's right. That's right.
And then his own party killed him and they went for the other guy. God, it just kills me.
And when King tried to organize the Poor People's March, with poor white farmers and black sanitation workers, and it's like now you can see like a rainbow of poor people coming together. I firmly believe the proverbial powers that be said, okay, that's enough. He's now organizing white and black, like men, women, all poor. No.
They will promote division or they'll leave division alone.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're super divisive, I'm not calling any names, but you'll be just fine.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
You will live long.
Yeah. And I often wonder, like, man, I know it's dangerous to get into a non-musical conversation, but like, if to really focus on things like that, sometimes I wonder if we, as a society, I think social media has not helped. We get distracted by a lot of things that aren't quite that important. And then while we get distracted by things that aren't quite that important, the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade.
Corporations are making stuff legal that should be illegal.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not breaking any laws. It's like, because you made some messed up, you lobbied, but that gets us, I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to cover.
I'm here for you, brother.
Thank you. It does bring us to another topic that's a big theme of our podcast, which is mental health.
Yes.
And for me, part of mental health is not being suckered, like being able to see the big picture.
Yes.
But also, like, in our line of work, being musicians, I won't say especially, but, it's the music business. We struggle a lot with drugs. Sex, alcohol, whatever.
Right.
Like, how have you navigated that? Because my heroes, I love that my heroes that live a really long time. The Roy Hayneses and the,
Sonny Rollins.
Yeah, Sonny. Like I saw Herbie. Dizzy, Herbie. Like, so what helped you get a zoomed out perspective, like, hey man, or were you always that way with drugs and alcohol and the whole thing?
Brother, I really, man, that's bless you for talking about this, man. Because as all of us know, one thing that has always been very frustrating for me is everyone seems to think our lives are great. Oh man, you get to play music, you go around the world and playing for people, it's not work. It's like, no, it's work. You know, I mean,
the playing part is at work, but the other 22 hours of the day.
Yeah, living your dream is a nightmare a lot of the time.
Yeah, Mike's on the road as a stand-up comedian a lot, so the lonely hotel thing is.
Benny Golson would say, like, you get paid to suffer 22 hours of the day as opposed to those 2 hours that you're on stage.
That's it. That is it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. There was a gig I did in Atlantic City that was a 7-day run, and I did 20 minutes of work a day. I had 23 hours and 40 minutes off a day, and I'm like, what do I do? I don't want to go down and gamble. I had just quit smoking, so I'm like, I don't even want to be in the casino area, you know?
Right.
Negative 10 degrees and icy out and whatever, and I'm just it's me in these four walls. Like, let's try not to completely break down, you know.
And how many of our friends have died recently trying to not being able to manage, like, killing time, you know, the isolation,
are dying, but dying inside, even though the outside's still, you know, blood still might still be pumping, but
everybody got a taste of it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Being isolated. I'm like, welcome to my world, mother. You know,
it's the worst.
Like, you know,
the pressure to produce, you know, like that pressure to, you know, like when you go on stage to perform, like, I'm really shocked at how many people think that's easy to do. Like, I know how I am, man. It's like I didn't realize I was like this until recently. Like, I have to get my head in the game. Like, I don't care how many times I go on stage night after night to play. I got to get my head right before I go on stage. And when I get my head right, that means I can't talk to anybody 15 minutes before showtime. You know, I just got to be like, let me get my head in the game. What are we going to play? What's the vibe like? You know, like, I really do feel like an athlete to a certain extent. And, like, most of the time, I mean, y'all know, people just want to come back and hang and, hey, what are you guys going to play tonight? I'm like, I don't know. Get the out of my dressing room, you know. And like, I don't say that, but that's what I'm thinking, you know. And, like, you finish playing, your heart's pumping, you're sweating, and then, like, people immediately want to come backstage and, like, kick it and hang. I'm like, look, you just got to give me 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes to decompress, and I will be the nicest guy in the world. But I need a little room to get my head right, you know. And I think that's part of the mental health thing that you're talking about. I growing up in Philly, man, and I know you saw this as well. I never knew what the phrase, like, most guys I knew growing up in Philly that did drugs, you could tell they did drugs, and, like, none of them were cool. Like anybody I saw who was doing, I mean, I didn't really see too much heroin, but a lot of cocaine and crack, which was becoming more and more popular in the mid and late 80s. I never saw anyone do it, but you could tell when there was somebody on that stuff, man. You could just tell. So when I moved to New York and started meeting people who were, I didn't know the phrase, but functioning addicts.
Yes.
I didn't know what that meant. You know, high functioning addicts. So, you know, I could see musicians who could drink like a whole fifth of scotch and still get on stage and play. Cats who would do, like, you know, a bunch of coke and still show up for the gig. Like, but I also realized that their bodies slowly disintegrated. You know, like, they weren't functioning for a long period. You know, they eventually hit a wall. And so I think growing up around a lot of sloppy addicts, that really helped me not to want to be one.
Cautionary tales. Yeah.
That's right. And plus my mom's great. You know, my mother was always, you know, she put the fear of God in me when it came to drugs and alcohol, you know. She's like, if I even think you on that, any of that stuff.
Well, and from that mental health perspective, and thinking about what you said earlier about how busy you stay and how many projects you have at once and how many things you have in the air. You know, I think that this idle time we talk about it a ton, how this pandemic, like, it's like we were all running from something and then we had to hit the brakes, and everything we ran from, it was like a 10-car pile up behind us.
Yeah.
It's like, now what, right? So you staying so busy and having so many projects and having that, like, that's in my opinion, a really important tool for mental health, because you take pride in what you do. You're a professional, and you put that into everything that you do. So, like, you don't leave time for those issues, and that's super important.
And for that reason, I always had to parse my words carefully. But like, I enjoyed being locked down. I enjoyed not working for almost 2 years. You know, man, it's like, you mean to tell me I don't have to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to go to the airport and go to the next gig? Yes.
Yes. When I just went to bed at 4 a.m.
Right.
Yeah. I'll do laundry at the next hotel. I love that one. Yeah.
That's right.
I'll do laundry at the next town.
And, it's like, people don't get it. When they started making those washable underwear, oh man, that was like the greatest thing in the world for touring musicians. I'd be in the bathroom, scrubbing them bad boys, and take the hair dryer and dry them bad boys off. But like,
I was washing underwear this tour the last couple weeks ago. It just didn't line up. We weren't close to the laundry, and I was like, and the sink.
But it's not work, guys. It's not work, right?
Exactly.
Oh, your job's a breeze.
Meanwhile, everyone thinks that, we're getting our feet rubbed and having grapes fed to us, But no, we're in the bathroom washing our underwear, trying to get them dry to get ready for the next gig.
We're out here living like
you can't get there too early, because if you get there too early, I'm sorry, your rooms aren't ready,
Yep.
And now you got to walk around town trying to find something to eat.
Yeah. Here's a voucher for a sandwich. Right. Oh, God.
I know. Where?
I know, right?
Struggle's real, y'all. Come on. It ain't what it looks like on the outside.
Yeah.
I love all the everything that you've put out. Live at Tonic has been like I burned that a CD out so many times. I had to make new ones and all of that, and one thing I wanted to ask you real quick before, I know we're keeping you a while here, but
no.
Do you have you've recorded live and you've recorded in studio, obviously you've done both. And when you do you have a preference for one? And also, if you're picking a live place to record, do you have a criteria, or do you do you have to check out the room, love the room, feel the room, and all that? Because some of the rooms you've chosen to record, and I personally kind of love just being in New York.
Oh, well, thank you, man. With acoustic instruments, it's maybe you have to be a bit more mindful of what the venue is. And I've also had the same engineer. For my own records, I've only used 2 engineers for like the last 20 years. So
that's cool.
If you have someone who actually knows your sound very well,
right,
then you don't have that much to worry about. But I've the Village Vanguard is like, if you've got like a small acoustic jazz group, the Vanguard is perfect. It's carpeted in there, but it's not completely dead. There's still some resonance in the room, enough to give it to know that you're in a live space,
Right.
But the carpet keeps the sound from bouncing around uncontrollably, and plus, just it's such a historic landmark,
Right.
But Tonic. Oh man, I missed that place so much, man. I mean, like that place was
that was so cool.
That place was more or less like you remember that place was like a garage, and like the energy of that place. I remember when we did Live Tonic, I specifically remember that it was like, because we did it in January, we did it right after the new year, and it was freezing outside. I remember one night it was like 9 degrees. But in the club, it was about 90 degrees, and I feel like a lot of us caught colds that week, because like it was hot as hell inside the club, and then you go outside and like
Sweating,
immediately
yeah.
you're freezing. So, but I mean, I don't really have a particular place that I like to record. Most important for me is having the engineer who knows how to capture your sound.
That's cool. All right. I always wonder that with jazz, especially, you know, I'm down in the West Village a lot doing stand up and stuff. And you go down to Cafe Wa and the Village Underground and Blue Note and all those rooms. And it's just like, it feels weird when there's not music playing, you know?
Yeah. Were you around? Was the Village Gate still around?
Not me. No, I've never been there, but, a lot of the guys that like play at the Cellar comedy at the Village Underground,
right?
Like Red and Jeremy and all those guys, and Lonnie. Like, I just love hanging with them afterwards and just like shooting the shit about bouncing around and playing in the city and stuff. It's just
right.
It's incredible.
Man, when I was a kid, growing up and you know listening to all of these great live albums, I realized that the Village Gate was one of the few places that had, you know, like Flip Wilson, Bill Cosby, all these guys did live records at the Village Gate, as well as, you know, Mingus, or, you know, all these cats that would do live records at the Village Gate. So when I first moved to New York, that used to be one of my go-to places just to hang.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, Flip Wilson and Miles Davis played here.
When did that place close?
94, the Village Gate closed. But the Village Vanguard also had comedy at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was
Professor Irwin Corey.
We had a guy on our podcast, Wavy Gravy, that's like a long time.
Oh yeah,
prankster, Grateful Dead guy, and he was there. What was it called? Artie's? Was that the name of the place, Mike?
Oh,
anyway, they used to have poetry.
The Lantern.
He used to have poetry readings, and he convinced them to have music. He was like, "Come on, try it." So they did, and like Bob Dylan was there. Nobody knew who he was,
right?
And but he said at a certain point, he was like a beat at that point. He was doing just like free form stuff, and he opened for like Monk and all this stuff. I was like, "What?"
That's
the
so
train.
Cool, man.
So
I was
cool,
like,
right?
Whoa, you know. And it's this dude in a clown suit that has a foundation for kids that always comes out with the Grateful Dead. And I was like, you used to open for Monk and Train.
Man, and that's something.
Yeah, it's really incredible.
Yeah. I love Bob Dylan's book where he talks about meeting Monk for the first time. I think it was at the Village Gate.
I bet it was.
He said he was so in awe of Monk. You know, he's like, hey, Monk just looked like he was always in his own world, you know, which he was, you know. And he said he walked up to him and said, you know, Mr. Monk, my name is Bob Dylan. I'm a big fan of yours. And Monk said, what do you do? He said, I'm a folk musician. And Monk said, well, shit, we all play folk music. What do you do?
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's deep.
There it is.
I love it.
Yeah, we all play folk music.
Man.
That's our
Well, look, man, I don't want to keep you, but I want to ask you one final question. Just totally selfish.
Anything you want, brother. Anything for you.
Too. I've met some of my heroes where it was such a letdown. But my biggest heroes, it got to a point where I wasn't sure I wanted to meet my heroes anymore.
Right.
But my biggest heroes were great. And when I met Elvin Jones, it was beyond, because I'm a drummer and Elvin was my favorite. And the second one was Roy Haynes.
Yes.
And they were just so sweet. And I've since met Wayne and Herbie. And who was your hero? Not the bad one, the good one that just made you feel so grateful that they were nice.
Ray Brown.
Yes, I thought that was going to be
Yeah. I mean, Ray Brown, I mean, I can't tell you how fortunate I feel that someone who I admired so much not only was such a nice man, but, you know, he wound up being like very much like a second father to me, you know. You know, I got to play with him and John Clayton in the Super Bass group. And Ray, of course, played, he and Mill Hinton both played a track on my debut album. And so, just Ray Brown was that was the man. I miss him a lot.
Yeah. For fans of Comes a Time, go Google Ray Brown bass player and see the people that he played with.
Yeah.
You blow your mind.
And I will also have to say 1A. So Ray Brown was 1A was George Duke.
Yes. Yeah. I actually had that on my list to ask you about. There's so many things that we didn't get to.
Oh no, it's all
we'll
good,
have to
man.
do part 2 for sure.
Yeah, we'll do part 2 because George Duke and Little John played with George
amazing.
Duke.
That's right.
Yeah, Kofi, my brother, he was a Herbie guy. He liked all the guys, Herbie, Chick.
I know, man.
All that. But George, man, he was so big on George, like a lot of people weren't as hip to George. So I'm really glad to hear that.
Oh, man. And, I think one of the reasons why we became so close is because George was actually surprised that, like, this New York young, straight-ahead jazz guy admired him so much. He's like, man, I thought the jazz cats wrote me off. I was like, no, man.
Yeah. No, man.
I don't know about those cats, but I love you.
The R will prevail.
Woo, come on now.
Yeah, man, yeah. All right, man. Bless you, Christian.
I love you, man.
I love you too, man.
You are the cat.
No, you, man. Thank you so much for blessing us with your time.
I can't wait to see you in person and hear you and learn from you, man. Like I always do. Mike, let's kick it. I might be in the city tomorrow. I don't know.
All right.
I have to get a permission slip from my wife.
All right.
I can't just go hang out like I used to. I'm like,
me neither.
Hey, honey, can I go hang with the fellas tonight?
We'll have to have a code word. Oh, I need to go. Right. Anytime, man. Thank you so much for joining us. This is
my
real
honor.
Thank you. Got to do it again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Do it again.